Imagine this. You go to sleep tonight in your comfortable bed, and when you wake up, everything is wrong. The ceiling is gone. Your walls are gone. Your phone, definitely gone. Instead, you're lying on cold ground, wearing animal skins, and somewhere nearby, something large is making a sound that suggests it would very much like to eat you. Congratulations. You've somehow been transported 15,000 years into the past, right into the middle of the last ice age. You still have all your memories, all your knowledge of history, science, and technology. You know about agriculture, metallurgy, the wheel, antibiotics, and TikTok dances. Surely you'll become a god among these primitive people, right? You'll introduce modern civilization, be worshipped as a genius, and live like a king. Well, not exactly. Here's the thing, nobody tells you about time travel fantasies. Knowing about something and knowing how to do something are completely different skills. You know smartphones exist, but could you build one from scratch? You know antibiotics save lives, but could you identify penicillin mold and process it correctly? You probably know the Earth orbits the sun, but try explaining that to people whose entire cosmology revolves around spirits in the trees. The reality is much more interesting and much more humbling. You're about to discover that survival in the Stone Age isn't about what you know. It's about what you can do. And right now, you can't do much. You don't know which plants are poisonous, which animals are dangerous, how to make fire without matches, or even how to nap a stone tool without shattering it into useless fragments and possibly cutting off your fingers. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, you need to figure out where and when you are. The world of 15,000 years ago is barely recognizable. The first thing that hits you is the cold. Not the kind of cold where you turn up the thermostat, but the kind that makes your bones ache and your teeth chatter uncontrollably. You're somewhere in what will one day be called the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Turkey, Syria, or Iraq. But right now, it's the tail end of the last glacial maximum, and the climate is nothing like the region you might know from history books. Massive ice sheets cover northern Europe and North America. Sea levels are 120 meters lower than in your time, exposing vast stretches of land. What will become the Persian Gulf is a river valley. Britain is connected to continental Europe by a land bridge called Doggerland. Indonesia and Malaysia form a single landmass called Sundaland. The entire planet holds only about 2 to 5 million people, fewer than live in modern Singapore. Looking around, you see a landscape of grasslands and scattered forests. Herds of animals move across the plains. Wild horses, aurochs, the massive ancestors of cattle, gazelles, and red deer. In the distance, you might spot something that makes your heart stop. A woolly mammoth, its curved tusks gleaming, its shaggy coat swaying as it walks. And that's not all. There are cave lions twice the size of modern lions, giant hyenas, and if you're really unlucky, a cave bear that weighs 1,000 kilograms and absolutely will kill you if you stumble into its den. This is a world where megafauna still rules, where humans are just another animal trying to survive, not the dominant species that reshaped the entire planet. You need shelter, and you need it fast. But here's your first problem. You have no idea how to build one. The people of this era construct simple huts from branches, animal skins, and bones, like the remains found at Ohallo, too near the Sea of Galilee. But knowing that doesn't help you replicate it, especially with your soft modern hands that have never done manual labor more strenuous than typing. You're stumbling through the grasslands, cold and confused, when you see smoke rising in the distance. People. Relief floods through you, until you remember that you look like them, smell worse than them, you haven't bathed in days and have no idea how, and don't speak a single word of their language. Because here's something most people forget. There is no Stone Age language. The humans you're about to meet speak a tongue that will leave no written record, no descendants, nothing. It's as alien to you as dolphin clicks. You approach their camp carefully, hands raised in what you hope is a universal gesture of peace. A group of about 30 people stare at you with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. They're not the brutish cavemen from old museum dioramas. These are fully modern humans, Homo sapiens, identical to you in every biological way. Their brains are the same size as yours. Their intelligence is the same. They're wearing carefully sewn leather clothing, adorned with beads made from shells and carved ivory. Some have ochre paint on their skin. A woman holds a baby, while children play with a small dog-like animal, evidence that wolves are already being domesticated. One of the men steps forward, speaking in a melodic, clicking language you can't comprehend. You try English, nothing. You try pantomiming. He pantomimes back, but you're not sure if he's asking who you are or threatening to spear you. This is going to be harder than you thought. Here's the brutal truth. Without language, you're worse than useless. You can't explain where you're from, can't share your advanced knowledge, can't even ask for food. You're like a toddler, but less cute and more suspicious. They might take pity on you, or they might decide you're a threat or a burden. These people live on the edge of survival. Every mouth to feed is a serious decision. You need to prove your worth, and fast. Let's take inventory of your Stone Age skill set. You know calculus. Useless. You can name all the presidents. Pointless. You understand germ theory. Great. But you can't see germs and have no way to prove they exist. You know that bread is made from wheat. Excellent. Except wheat doesn't exist yet, at least not in domesticated form, and wild grains are tiny, hard to process, and grow in scattered patches that these people already know about far better than you. The people around you, meanwhile, possess skills that took them entire childhoods to master. They can track an animal for days by reading signs in the dirt you can't even see. They know every edible plant within 100 kilometers, which berries will kill you, which roots need to be cooked to be safe, and which bark can be chewed to relieve pain. They can make fire in minutes using a bow drill or hand drill, a skill that will take you weeks of practice and many blistered hands to learn. They can knap flint into razor-sharp blades, scrape and cure animal hides into soft leather, weave baskets so tight they hold water, and navigate by stars you can't even identify. One of the hunters offers to teach you to make a spear. Sounds simple, right? It's not. First, you need to find the right kind of wood. Straight, strong, flexible. Then, you need to heat it over fire to straighten it further without burning it. Then, you need to harden the tip in the flames at just the right temperature. Or, if you want a stone point, you need to knap it from flint, which involves striking stones together at precise angles to create sharp flakes without shattering the whole thing. Your first 15 attempts produce only useless chunks and cut fingers. The children laugh at you. Even worse is trying to hunt. You join a group tracking deer, feeling confident because you've seen nature documentaries. But when the moment comes, you can't throw the spear with any accuracy. You make too much noise, and you tire within an hour of walking. These people can run for hours, read the landscape like a book, and communicate with hand signals you don't understand. You return empty-handed while they carry a kill. You're becoming a liability. After weeks of fumbling, freezing, and failing, you finally have a breakthrough. Not because you invented something revolutionary, but because you remembered something simple: knots. Modern humans use dozens of specialized knots for different purposes, and you happen to remember a few: the bowline, the clove hitch, the sheet bend. One day, while watching someone struggle to secure a hide to a wooden frame, you step in and tie a proper knot. It holds better than their simple wraps. Eyes widen. Someone asks you to do it again. You do. Suddenly, you're the knot guy. It's not much, but it's something. You teach them the bowline, and within days, it spreads through the camp. You've made your first contribution to Stone Age society, and it only took a month of being completely useless. Emboldened, you try to introduce other innovations. You attempt to explain the wheel, but nobody understands why you'd want a circular piece of wood. There are no roads, no carts, no beasts of burden strong enough to pull them. The wheel won't be useful for thousands of years. You try to explain agriculture. planting seeds deliberately to grow food. They look at you like you're insane. Why would we do that, they gesture, when we can just gather the seeds that are already growing? They have a point. Wild grains exist, but they're scattered, small-kerneled, and the idea of staying in one place for months to tend them makes no sense to a mobile people who follow animal migrations. You don't yet understand that agriculture isn't just a good idea. People were waiting to discover. It's a complex package of environmental conditions, population pressure, and social organization that hasn't aligned yet. Then you remember. Bread. The people at Ohalo 2, right around this time period, were already processing wild grains. But you know that if you grind grains fine enough and mix them with water, you can make a dough and cook it. You convince someone to let you try. Using their grinding stones, flat mortars, and round hand stones, you laboriously grind wild wheat seeds into a coarse flour, mix it with water, and cook it on hot stones by the fire. The flatbread you made is dense, gritty, and bland, but it's edible and calorie-rich. A few people try it, shrug, and go back to roasting meat and nuts. It's not the revolution you hoped for, just another food preparation method among many they already know. You're learning a humbling lesson. These people aren't ignorant. They're incredibly knowledgeable about their world. They just live in a different world than you do. One evening, a child develops a fever. You watch helplessly as the group's healer, probably a shaman, treats her with herbal poultices and chanted rituals. You know about antibiotics. You know about viruses and bacteria, but you can't do anything. You don't know which plants have medicinal properties. You can't create sterile conditions, and you certainly can't synthesize penicillin from scratch. The child recovers on her own, and you realize that the healer's remedies, accumulated over generations of trial and error, are far more useful than your theoretical knowledge. You try to improve sanitation, insisting people shouldn't defecate near the water source. They look at you oddly. They already don't do that. They're not stupid. You suggest boiling water to make it safe to drink. They nod politely, but don't bother. Because the stream is clear and cold, and nobody's getting sick from it. Your modern paranoia about germs seems ridiculous here. Then, winter truly arrives, and you face your greatest challenge yet. Staying alive in temperatures that regularly drop below freezing. Your modern body, used to climate control and central heating, is wholly unprepared. You huddle by fires, wear every scrap of fur you can get, and still shiver through the nights. Frostbite nips at your fingers and toes. You develop a cough that won't go away. Without antibiotics, without proper nutrition, without vitamin supplements, your health begins to deteriorate. You're losing weight despite eating regularly, because the diet, heavy on lean meat and low on carbohydrates, is so different from what your body is used to. This is when you truly understand you're not superior to these people. You're inferior. Your survival depends entirely on their mercy, their skills, their willingness to share food with someone who contributes so little. Months pass, maybe a year. You stop counting because calendars don't matter here. Only seasons, animal migrations, and whether you'll eat today. Slowly, painfully, you begin to change. Your hands develop calluses. Your feet toughen. You learn to read the weather by the color of the sky, to identify animal tracks in the mud, to know when the salmon run will begin. You're learning their language too, a slow process of pointing, repeating, and making embarrassing mistakes. Children are your best teachers because they're patient with your childlike vocabulary. You learn that their world isn't simple at all. They have complex kinship systems, trading networks that extend hundreds of kilometers, elaborate stories about the stars and animals, and spiritual beliefs so nuanced you barely grasp them. They have music, art, humor, and drama. They argue about the same things people always argue about. Who's sleeping with whom? Who didn't share fairly? Whether that stranger from the northern clan can be trusted. They're just people, living full human lives. One day, you're invited to join a gathering where multiple groups meet to trade, arrange marriages, and share stories. Hundreds of people camp together for a week. There's dancing, singing, Feasting on a deer someone killed, people show off beautiful shell necklaces, finely napped spear points, fox pelts. A master toolmaker demonstrates his technique, and people crowd around, learning. You realize you're witnessing something profound: cultural transmission, innovation, social bonding. These people are actively improving their technology, sharing ideas, experimenting. You didn't bring civilization to them. They're building it themselves, just very, very slowly. Then someone asks you about your origin story. Where do you come from? Through halting words and gestures, you try to explain. A place far away, you say. A time far away. They nod thoughtfully. Several people share their own stories about distant lands, ancestors who came from across the mountains, dreams of other worlds. Your story isn't that strange to them. They accept it with the same openness they accept stories about the spirits who live in the river or the hero who stole fire from the sky. You're just another mystery in a mysterious world. Years pass. You're no longer the confused, helpless person who arrived in this world. You're leaner, harder, competent in ways you never imagined. You can start a fire, track game, identify hundreds of plants, speak the language fluently. You've formed bonds, friendships, maybe even a family. You're part of the community now, not an outsider. But what have you actually changed? Looking back honestly, very little. You introduced a few knot types that make certain tasks easier. You showed people that ground grain could be cooked into flatbread, though most still prefer other foods. You convinced a few hunters that feathers on the back of a spear make it fly straighter. They were skeptical until they tried it and realized you were right. But you didn't invent agriculture. You didn't jumpstart the Bronze Age. You didn't teach them writing or mathematics or the scientific method. Because here's the truth. Civilizations don't emerge because one genius has good ideas. They emerge when thousands of factors align: population density, environmental conditions, resource availability, social structures, accumulated knowledge across generations, and pure chance. The Neolithic revolution that will eventually transform these hunter-gatherers into farmers won't happen for another 5,000 years in this region. It won't happen because someone thought, hey, farming seems smart. It will happen because climate change at the end of the Ice Age makes certain areas more productive, because population growth makes hunting less viable, because people are already semi-sedentary and experimenting with plants, because the right wild species exist in the right places to be domesticated. You can't force that process. You can only participate in it. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the fantasy of becoming a time-traveling god king was always ridiculous. These people don't need saving or enlightening. They're already sophisticated, already innovative, already on their own path toward the future. One evening, sitting by the fire, you have a strange thought. What if someone from the year 17,000 AD appeared in your old world? They'd have knowledge of technologies you couldn't imagine, problems you'd never heard of, solutions to questions you didn't know to ask. And they'd be just as helpless in your world as you were here, unable to drive a car without keys, access the internet without passwords, or navigate society without proper identification. So, what does happen when someone with a modern mind wakes up in the Stone Age? You survive, if you're lucky, and people are kind. You learn. You adapt. You become part of the flow of history rather than its master. But there's one thing you can do that matters more than any invention. You can teach people to ask different questions. Not, how do we survive today? But, what if we tried this differently? You encourage experimentation. When someone makes a new tool, you suggest variations. When someone dismisses an idea, you ask, but what if? You don't have answers, but you can foster curiosity, the scientific mindset, the willingness to test and iterate. Maybe, just maybe, that subtle shift accelerates things slightly. One generation teaches the next to be more experimental, more willing to try new techniques. Over centuries, that compounds. The agricultural revolution might happen a few decades earlier. Tool refinement might progress slightly faster. Or maybe not. Maybe your influence vanishes like smoke, forgotten within 2 generations. After all, you're just one person among millions, across thousands of years. Here's what you definitely learned though. Respect. Respect for the people who built civilization from nothing, over tens of thousands of years, through trial and error and countless failures. Respect for the reality that knowledge and wisdom are different things. Respect for the fact that every human society, no matter how primitive it seems, is brilliantly adapted to its environment and filled with intelligent, creative, fully human people. You also learn something about yourself. Stripped of technology, convenience, and modern comfort, you discover whether you can adapt, whether you can learn, whether you have the humility to accept that you're not special. Just a person, trying to survive and find meaning, exactly like everyone else who has ever lived. And maybe that's the real answer to the question. If you woke up in the Stone Age with today's mind, what would happen? You'd discover that the human mind hasn't changed in 15,000 years. The people around you have the same hopes, fears, intelligence, and capacity for innovation that you do. They're not waiting for you to enlighten them. They're already on their journey. You'd just be joining them for a while. And if you're very, very lucky, you might contribute one small thread to the vast tapestry they're weaving. A tapestry that will eventually become the world you came from. Not because you're special, but because every human being who ever lived adds something to the story. Even you, shivering by a fire 15,000 years ago, trying to remember how to tie a bowline, while somewhere in the distance, a mammoth calls out to the frozen stars.